Hello and welcome to the Strong, Healthy, Happy podcast. My name is Deborah, but you already know that. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you're joining me for the first time, the episode first of all, welcome, but the episode you're about to listen to, and this is for anybody listening, this is part 3, the third and final part of the Women's Health, Menopause and Weight Loss event, which was an in-person event I held locally to me. I have broken it down into 3 podcasts, and today is the 3rd episode. So if you haven't yet listened to the first 2 parts, you need to go back to episode 81, episode 80, 81, 81, 82, and today is 83. I'm doing this all from memory, hence my vagueness there on the episodes. But you want to listen to them in order because it's going to make better sense. Now, whilst you're here as well, I want to just ask you really kindly to please share my podcast with your friends. And the reason why I ask for you to share my podcast with your friends is because I want to reach and help as many women as possible. And my podcast allows me to do that. It is totally free and it's very helpful. And there's always lots of tips and advice in every single episode that I have recorded. So share, whether you tag me on your social media, whether you share my podcast link in your WhatsApp groups, however you choose to share me with your friends, please do, because if you've benefited, most likely so will your friends, and I'm sure you know lots of people, or even just one person who would benefit. And it helps me to reach more people, also get more listeners, and I just genuinely want to help women feel good. And this podcast is the main motivation of why I started my podcast. So let's crack on with what we're going to do today. Before I do that, I want to just recap over what we did previously so that we can because obviously it might be a week or so since you listened, or maybe you're listening to these all in succession, then it's going to be fresh in your mind. But just in case it isn't, the first part podcast that I did is I talked about menopause and the impacts of menopause can have on your health, as well as the way that you feel and your energy, your mood, can affect your sleep, and many other symptoms that can affect how you show up for yourself day to day. And everyone's an individual, everyone is different, everyone's level of symptoms or the severity of their symptoms, the frequency of them happening is very different amongst us all. But it's really important, and I talked about this in the first part podcast, is that considerations need to be made in menopause. The actual message in terms of the advice for achieving long-term health, improving your fitness, losing weight, improving the way you feel, the advice doesn't change no matter your sex, your age, what stage of life you're in. The advice is the same, but what does need to be approached differently are the considerations needed, and understanding and empathy needed to be able to help and coach women who are going through the menopause, because your menopause symptoms may be affecting the way that you show up for yourself, may be affecting you doing the things that you know you need to do, but you just can't do them because of the way that you feel. So it is really important to have considerations, and I go into depth in that on that topic in episode 81, so do go and listen. I also talked about showing yourself self-compassion and how self-compassion is needed, and how different self-compassion can look. It doesn't necessarily mean being soft, it can sometimes mean tough love, but putting these considerations and self-compassion and the risks, the increased risks you have as a woman going through menopause, such as an increased risk of reduced bone density, an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and an increased risk of muscle loss. It is really important that we are supporting our health and doing what's needed to reduce those risks, as well as manage menopause symptoms, and as well as feel better in your day-to-day life. So that's just a recap of that first part. The other episode part 2 of the Women's Health, Menopause and Weight Loss event that I put into a podcast was the previous episode to this. And I talked all about weight loss and how to approach successful weight loss. And again, all combined with menopause. When you're going through menopause, often we notice that weight weight gradually creeps up. Our body shapes may sometimes change, not necessarily for all women, but for some women may notice a change in body shape. And in the previous episode, I talked all about that. I also talked about the nutrition fundamentals, how to eat a healthy, balanced diet, what that looks like, how to fill your plate. And I talked all about that, as well as the importance of a daily walk, movement in your day, as well as exercising, and a particular focus on strength training, because strength training reduces all your risks that I read out to you earlier that can happen as part of menopause, as well as being able, as well as it enabling you to live not just a longer life, but a better quality life, because we want to have a good quality life, not just a long life. And what I'm going to do today in today's episode is I'm going to bring all what I've done in the previous episodes, plus what I'm going to talk about today. I'm bringing it all together and going to be talking to you today about how to create the habits that you need to have in order to support your long-term health and your goals, and support all those things that I've talked about in the introduction today and in more detail in those previous episodes. Because we often know what to do, and I hear this a lot from women that I speak to a lot of the time. I know what to do, I just need to do it. And yes, of course, that we can all say that. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. It doesn't matter if, coaches, whether you're experienced in health and fitness and you've been doing this thing for a long time. It's not just as simple as knowing what to do and why aren't I doing it. We have to create the habits to support doing the things that you need to do, and ultimately supporting your long-term health. Now, when it comes to weight loss, it's often seen as a short-term thing. It's not something that you're necessarily going to do for the rest of your life. Also, weight loss can be seen as a short-term thing due to your lack of interest or desire to continue losing weight or being bothered to lose weight. And it can often come and go. But what I want to emphasize in today's podcast episode is the importance of long-term goals over short-term weight loss goals. And I'm talking about long-term health goals instead of short-term weight loss goals. Now, long-term health goals, it's not very exciting. It doesn't sound very exciting, but the difference in your success, the difference in how you show up for yourself every day, the difference in how you feel from establishing these habits that you are able to do to support your goals, your health, and everything that you want to feel can be really life-changing. And I know often when women embark on a sort of health and fitness journey, they're looking for the path of least resistance. And as human beings, that is something that we always do, is look for the path of least resistance. And also is we want the exciting stuff. We want the sexy stuff. We want the magic stuff. We want what our favorite celebrities doing. We want to, eat what someone else is eating because we want to look like that person is portraying. And it's so mixed up into your emotions and the way that you perceive your long-term health. But I'm here to talk to you about creating habits, because that sexy stuff that you see, whether it be on social media or magazines or wherever you see it, it might look sexy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. And from my experience coaching women, it does not lead to success. It leads to a very short-term success, if that at all. It is about you finding your own path that works for you, creating the habits that are realistic and achievable for you to be able to get consistent with. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. Now, what is a habit? Like, what is a habit? You know, we all know our bad habits, but what is a healthy habit? What are the habits that we need to talk about? Now, in the previous two podcasts, I shared with you lots of information, right? If we think about the movement one, I talked about, you know, the importance of getting out for a daily walk. You could create a daily walk as one of your habits, right? And it might just be 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be like a big, long, drawn out thing. Start small so that you can achieve that habit that you create. So that might be a habit. I also talked about, you know, including protein. I talked about, like in the nutrition section, talked about eating protein. I talked about the importance of adding plenty of veg or fruit to your meals. That could be a habit. Can you add veg to each, veg or fruit? See, I'm hiccuping because I've got a coffee here. Just on a side note, because I walked in the pouring down rain this afternoon just before sitting down to record this podcast. I've got a hot drink. My jeans are all damp from getting wet, but I wanted to record this podcast because this is one of my Sunday habits that I like to get consistent with, and I do it. Even when I don't want to do it, I still do it. And this is one of the things about habits. And I come on to consistency in a minute. But backtracking, when you create your habits, you need to think about what 3 things you can commit to. Is it the daily walk? Is it adding vegetables? You know, maybe start with adding veg to your lunch. Perhaps you don't add any veg. Veg can be salad, can be any type of vegetable. It could be fruit, depending on the meal type and your preferences. Could it be doing some strength training? Could it be starting to exercise? Could it be getting to bed at a more reasonable time to support better sleep? And I talked about that in the Menopause podcast. So thinking about all the things I've talked about, was there anything that resonated with you in terms of, oh yeah, I need to do that, or I'm not doing that? These are things that you could set as your habits, and they're daily habits, and you don't want to create more than 3. You could even start with 1, master that 1 habit, and then add in another habit, and then you've got 2 that you then master, and then you could add in 3, or you could go straight in with 2 or 3. It is totally up to you, but it's important to set yourself up to succeed and not overwhelm yourself with too many different things to do. So think about how many habits that you can create for yourself, and what are those habits going to be? They can be anything that I've given you as suggestions, or they could be your own habit. It could be coming off your phone 30 minutes prior to bed. And again, I talked about that in the menopause episode 81, about supporting better sleep, because women in menopause often struggle with poor sleep, and this is a way of getting better sleep. So think about what 3 habits, up to 3 habits, you can create for yourself. Write them down, your 3 habits. And then you want to aim to tick off those habits every single day. Now, the way that you create those habits and get consistent with them, I would really recommend that you write them down, put them somewhere visible, so you have a reminder every single day. And see if you use a diary or a calendar, put them in your diary. Now, I use Google Calendar. I put every single thing in Google Calendar, whether it's work related, personal related, or my own habits that I want to get consistent with. So my daily walk is in my calendar, in my Google Calendar. It features every day. I may adjust the time, but I do it every single day. It's in my calendar. So scheduling what it is that you need to do into your calendar. So depending on the habit, if it's doing exercise, what exercise are you going to do it? Where are you doing it? When are you doing it? Schedule it into your diary or your calendar. Same for your other habits. And it helps you become a bit more self-accountable to yourself. And you want to make them realistic. So like I said, If you currently don't have any vegetables with any of your meals and you're setting one of your habits as to add more vegetables, perhaps start with one meal and then build it up from there. And if you're not currently going out for a daily walk at all, start with the 10 minutes to the end of the road and back. It doesn't have to be a whole big thing, but schedule it in so you know when you're doing it and you can stay better accountable to yourself. But planning and scheduling is very, very important. It's something I encourage my clients to do. And I have recorded a podcast on that. If you haven't listened to it, just scroll back and you'll see it. It will also help you get more successful in achieving your habits. Now, once you've established your habits and you're getting, you're doing everything I've suggested, they're in your diary, you've identified the 3 habits, you've made them realistic, and you've incorporated them into your day-to-day life, then you want to try and get consistent with them. Now, often we, especially women, we try to be perfect. We want to be perfect. We want to do it all. And not only do we want to do it all, we want to do it all 100% perfect. Now, I talk about perfection quite a lot in my podcasts because aiming for perfection is your first step to failing, because you may be perfect some of the time, but when you can't do things perfectly, you end up thinking that you failed and it's not worth doing the other things if you're not going to be 100% perfect. And so it leads to like this all or nothing, a little bit of an all or nothing mentality, in the sense of, if I can't do it all, then I'm not going to do anything. As opposed to thinking, I've got 3 habits. I managed to add veg to my meals, but I didn't get out for a walk. So sod it, I won't bother doing the exercise either. And I'll just not worry about it because I can't do it all. And so what you're doing is you're adopting this all or nothing mindset instead of thinking about, what can I do? I'm going to do what I can to the best of my ability, and I'm going to let go whatever it is that I can't do. I'm not going to let it affect my other choices, my other decisions. And you will get more progress from having this approach than that perfectionist approach. Remember, it's what you do most of the time that matters the most. And so it may not be perfect, but if you're imperfectly consistent, you're going to be making more progress, because it's what you do most of the time that matters most. And recognizing doing what you can is better than doing nothing at all. Instead of doing your whole workout, you pick 2 exercises or 3 exercises instead of the usual 5. That's fine. Do it. It's better to do those 3 exercises than not bother doing any of them at all. So remember, imperfectly consistent is a whole lot better than trying to be perfect. And I want you to adopt that approach with your healthy habits. How do you implement and apply, like, what you've learned over these 3 podcast episodes? Obviously, the first 2 are a lot in greater depth. This is a more of a bringing everything together episode and the habits episode. But how do you apply what you've learned from the previous 2? So the way that I talked about it in my women's health event was, I re-emphasized the importance of establishing those 3 daily habits. And I asked the ladies at the event to think about, what 3 habits could they think about for themselves, like right now? And I ask you, the listener, the same question. What 3 things could you get more consistent with that you can think of right now? And when I say consistent, I mean imperfectly consistent. I'm not talking about perfection. So think about what 3 habits you could implement, because it's the implementation and applying what you've learned that will bring you closer to your goals. The other advice is embracing imperfect consistency. And of course, having a coach helps you implement what it is that you need to implement, because having the support of a coach and the accountability will increase your chances of success. Now, this isn't me selling my coaching services, but it might be something that you've been thinking about for some time, but not taking any action. And actually, maybe you don't fully understand what's involved with online coaching. And if that is you, contact me via the show notes in this podcast episode. There is a link to apply for coaching, and we can just have an informal chat, and there is no obligation. And if coaching is not something that's accessible to you, take on board the advice from this podcast. It is great advice, and advice I use within my coaching. Remember, you need to try and engage your logical brain as well when it comes to yourself. When it comes to ourselves, it's very hard to be objective, and it's very hard to think with logic. And even the most intelligent corporate level businesswoman I've coached, when it comes to weight, body, body image, and everything, and all the emotional things that get tied up with that, we can often lose our minds and all thoughts of logic. So taking a deep breath and stepping back away from being right into the center of the situation you're in, think about, how can I approach this situation with logic? You know, if it's something that perhaps you haven't quite achieved and you were hoping to achieve, think about it with logic. Take on board my advice about embracing in being imperfectly consistent. Always treat yourself with kindness. Berating yourself into change, negative self-talk, shaming yourself, punishing yourself into change may work short term, but it will never work on the long term. So always approach yourself with kindness. You also want to reduce any feelings of overwhelm, which is why I don't want you setting any more than 3 daily habits. Master them. Get really bloody good at doing them consistently. Not perfect, but doing them consistently. And if 3 habits are overwhelming, go down to 1, and you can chop and change this depending on how you feel. And as women with hormones, sometimes we feel ready to take it all on, and sometimes we have to reduce that because we don't feel ready. We're being impacted. Our emotions and hormones are being impacted. Think of your habits as little promises to yourself, and you don't want to let yourself down. So when you put something in your diary, that daily walk, adding the veg, doing the workout, whatever, going to bed early, whatever the healthy habit is, think of these as promises to yourself. And when you achieve them and you are successful in carrying out that little promise that you made to yourself, the feeling of self-accomplishment is so fulfilling, and you'll feel really proud of yourself. And those feelings are very motivating, and they will encourage you to keep repeating the habits that made you feel that way. So it helps you build self-accomplishment, self-confidence, and success within yourself, and self-accountability. I'm just looking at the summary from my health event, and my summary says, no matter your age, no matter your stage of life or your goals, you have the ability to make change. And my bullet points are to always do what makes you feel good, to support your physical and your mental well-being, to age strong and independent, to manage your menopause symptoms, to benefit your long-term health, to improve the quality of your life so you can enjoy a long life. And no matter what happens, to never quit and to never give up on yourself. The goal is to feel a stronger, healthier, and happier version of yourself whilst you achieve your goals. And this summarizes and brings all together the information from those first 2 podcasts into the summary today, in the implementation and the consistency and the self-compassion and kindness you need to show yourself, being imperfectly consistent, and setting realistic expectations. And I truly believe, even though I don't know who's listening to this individually, I truly believe that women are more capable than they give themselves credit for. And unfortunately, maybe past experiences have set them up not for success, has set unrealistic expectations. And everything I do within this podcast and within my coaching is always to set you up better for success. So please take on board my feedback. If you have any questions, you can reach me through any of my social media, or my email. All my details are shared in the podcast notes, in the episode notes. If you are not currently subscribed to my email list, you need to be, because I will be planning a follow-up women's health event. And if you want to be the first to know, you need to be subscribed to my email list. So the link to that is also in the show notes. Thank you for listening. I hope you found these 3 episodes helpful. And next week, we're back onto normal episodes, not covering the health event. And if you have any topic suggestions or anything you would specifically like me to talk about, reach out and let me know. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch up with you on the next one.